whoever had this GPS has been flying all over Nepal and landing all over Mount Everest. And he said, "Oh, that was me." And I was like, "What? You got to be like, what's the story?"
Welcome to 10-Minute Travels. With me, as always, is Shane Patrick.
And with me, as always, is Phil Freeman. Tonight, we're going to be talking with Ryan Skorecki, helicopter pilot's flown all over the world. If you want to learn more about him or other things we talk about at 10-Minute Travels, check us out at 10minutetravels.com.
Let's get right to it, shall we?
So from one set of mountains to another, how did you get hooked up with Nepal?
So in Nepal, I actually owe it to the Antarctic program. So what happened, I'll do like the short, long version. But so Garmin does not produce a base map for Antarctica for the GPSs. So we're all flying around with these black screens with just dots, waypoints. But there's no terrain info or anything because Garmin, there's probably less than, maybe in the whole continent, there's 100 pilots between all of the bases around.
Yeah, there's just no money in it.
There's no money in it, right? So Garmin doesn't produce base map. So, and Garmin's as bad as Apple in regards to that whole concept of even though you bought the device, they think that they still own it, so they don't want you to do what you want with the thing. And anyway, so I ended up buying this software that basically let me, I won't use the word hack, but it let me force a base map onto my GPS. And lo and behold, hey, I've got a GPS with a base map on it. This is amazing, And so one of the Kiwi pilots, his name was Jason, he came up to me one day and I just met him, and he said, it was something like, "I hear you're the nerd who can put a map on my GPS." And I was like, "Well, yeah, and thanks, And so he gave me his GPS, and then whenever I do something to someone's GPS, I always save a backup in case I screw something up,
Sure.
So I'm saving the backup of his GPS, and when I look at it, I save like everything, the waypoints, the tracks, everything. And when I look at it, the tracks, I'm like, this has been landing all over Mount Everest, And so when I gave him back his GPS the following day, I said, "Who did you buy this from? Like, whoever had this GPS has been flying all over Nepal and landing all over Mount Everest." And he said, "Oh, that was me." And I was like, "What? You got to be like, what's the story?" And he told me the whole deal. I had no idea that it was even possible. And then I just remained friends with him. Obviously I flew with him the rest of that season, and then just stayed friends with him from then on. And every once in a while, when I talked to him, every once in a while, I'd mention like, "Hey man, if they ever need anybody else, I'm interested." And then in 2016, he came back down. He was there flying for the Kiwis again, and he said, "Hey, I was just asked if I knew anybody that I'd recommend, and are you still interested?" And I said, "Yeah." And so he hooked me up there.
And what was the job?
Well, there's like, at the time there were probably 6 or 7 Nepali helicopter companies, and they, the vast majority of the flying is, well, I guess it's all a big mix, but a lot of it is rescue flights of different caliber, like everything from this person is, about to die to this person has a slight headache and maybe isn't even really sick, but
catering to the mountaineering side of things.
Yep. And then the way that the system all works out is like a Western mountaineer typically is going to pay for the flight, right? Or their insurance company is going to pay for the flight to go from Kathmandu to Lukla, and then from Lukla. So you're going to there's no fuel system. Once you leave Kathmandu going to Lukla, there's no fuel. So you have to take everything with you. But you'd be way too heavy with a full tank of gas to land where you need to land. It's way too heavy. So you have to land at Lukla, and a poor Nepali guy puts a hose in the tank and siphons it out, mouthful of jet fuel and everything. It's terrible, but that's how they do it. So you'll land there with, by the time you take off from Kathmandu with full tank, land at Lukla, and you've got about 70 to 80% left, and then they'll siphon out until you get down to about 20%, and then from there, then you go up high. And
what's high?
The highest in the book, the limit is 23,000 for the B3Es, and then the highest, like Camp 2 is 21,000. So that's as high as I've been. Is Camp 2. They've done some rescues a little higher than that, but the highest that I've gone is Camp 2. It's really common to go to Base Camp 17,000, so it's real common to go there. But so typically, like a Westerner's insurance company is going to pay for that flight from Kathmandu, Lukla up to them. And what they'll do is, like the locals typically the locals, of course, don't have the funds to pay for helicopter flights. But because that flight is being paid for by the Westerner, the locals will get to take advantage of that. So, like, let's say they tell me they want me to go to Fariche to pick up somebody that's got some form of altitude sickness. They'll throw all sorts of cargo on, or locals or whatever that need to go to Fariche, and that'll all get moved basically not for free, but it's being paid for by the Westerner.
Oh, you're turning into a bush plane kind of.
Yeah. And that way everyone stays happy. Like once the locals decide they don't like the helicopter noise, or they don't, then the industry's done there. But everyone there loves the helicopters because they get these services out of it. Like the high paying Westerners kind of like subsidize the locals flying, I guess is the way to put it. But so yeah, it's lots of moving people and stuff around.
So taking off with 20%, how many minutes of flight time is that?
Well, at sea level, it's sea level, like when the fuel light comes on at sea level, you get about 20 minutes, and so the fuel light's going to come on somewhere between 15 and 20%. But as you go higher and higher, the fuel burn decreases. And when you're at, like, I would take off with the fuel light on from base camp to go up to, so like what we do is we time it so that we're leaving Lukla with enough fuel to get to base camp to just before that fuel light comes on. And then in the back, I've got 4 or 5 jerry cans full of fuel. And so we land at base camp at 17,000. You kick out the jerry cans, and then you take off. And then, like, soon after taking off, the fuel light's going to come on. But at 20,000 feet, instead of that amount of gas lasting for 20 minutes, the same amount of gas is going to last for 45 to 50 minutes.
Because the turbine's so much more efficient.
Yeah, like the burn rate, it just decreases. And the nice thing with the B3s, or the B3s and the B3Es, or anything that has the digital display in those A-stars, is called a VEMD, the Vehicle and Engine Multifunction Display. And in the bottom corner, it shows you, it's a digital fuel gauge with a digital fuel flow, and it shows you how many minutes, how much time you have left.
That's eerie, though, isn't it?
No, I mean, it's going to last. I mean, it's not lying. It's showing you how much the fuel flow rate, and it's showing you how much, you have. It's all in numbers. How much gas you have, how much you're burning, and how long it's going to last. And then once you Camp 2 from base camp, it's not far when you're flying. I mean, it obviously takes a long time to walk through the icefall, but flight time wise, it's not far. Just a few minutes. And then once you get up there and you take off and you're coming back, it's just less than 5 minutes, and you're back to base camp, and then they pour the gas on and you go back down to Lukla.
Yeah, that's a different experience level. Like, I'm trying to think of, maybe I've had the fuel light come on 6 times, maybe. And it's typically like, I can see where I'm landing.
Right.
So taking off at 20%, it's old hat now, but it probably took a little getting used to.
Yeah, I mean, normally when you see it that low, your next stop is where or you're thinking, where am I going? I'm on my way to get gas right now. But when you're that high, it's going to last a lot longer.
Right.
And even like the, like the flight planning app that I use to confirm all of the like the weight and balance numbers and performance numbers, it confirms that. Like when you put in the altitude you're going to, it adjusts the fuel flow rate in the app, so it's like double confirming what the computer in the helicopter is telling you.
Yeah, and that's why the airplanes go straight up as soon as they can.
Yeah.
And why Delta is mad at their pilots for capping them at 30,000 feet. So, did you spend most of your time in Kathmandu? Did you do nights in Lukla?
Yep, they call it a night stop if you spend the night somewhere outside of Kathmandu. So yeah, I spent a lot of nights in Lukla, and then similar to, or like what you'd expect, the weather typically is better in the mornings. So it was real common, especially like in the Annapurnas and so Lukla is like east of Kathmandu, and then if you go west and northwest from Kathmandu, then you end up like in the Annapurna area, Pokhara and Dhaulagiri and that whole area. And oftentimes, you get sent to do like a rescue flight, and it happens later in the day, and the weather is not going to let you get into the mountains. But so what you'd do is you'd go to you'd fly to a closer village that you could get to, and then spend the night there so that you can get up, first thing in the morning and go get them. So I spent multiple evenings in a town called Jomsom to do just that, so that you I'd fly out there, confirm, yep, can't get there, the weather's terrible, and then we'll just stay in Jomsom and then in the morning try it. And did the same thing in Pokhara multiple times. Also, what happens is in Nepal, you're not allowed to fly at night. So oftentimes it's happened more than once where like I go to pick up somebody and can't get back to Kathmandu before sunset. So we'll go to Pokhara or pick some place that you want to spend the night. Go there. Pokhara's a good place because they have good hospital. The one that happened last year was I picked up this Israeli guy that him and his buddy were hiking along. The village they were near, it's called Thorong Fedi, and he was hiking along and a rock came out of nowhere and hit him, broke his ankle, and like total fluke. Nothing they did wrong, but we couldn't get back to Kathmandu before it was dark, so I took him to Pokhara, and then the hospital. He spent the night there, and then the next morning took him back to Kathmandu. So that was real common.
That was Ryan Skorecki, helicopter pilot extraordinaire. If you want to learn more about him or anything else we talked about at 10 Minute Travels, check us out at 10minutetravels.com.
And we want to remind you to make sure that your sense of humor matches your sense of adventure.
And please like, subscribe, and share this podcast on all the platforms.